Hey everyone, my name's Tomatoanus, also known as Shriveled Salami, and this, these are any % speedruns of Elden Ring. This video will be covering how speedruns are done of both the any % restricted and unrestricted categories. These runs are performed by Seeker, who not only holds the record for the any % unrestricted category, but is a top runner for the restricted category as well, and helped me write the script for this video to make sure it's all as accurate as possible. This is also Seeker's 6th time helping make a video for this channel, so everyone be sure to say hi to your favorite Uncle Seeker in the comments. So if you're unaware, Elden Ring has multiple any % categories, with 2 of them being restricted and unrestricted. Both have the same objective, reach the credits of the game, and they both follow the same standard rules of any % where glitches are allowed, but in every leaderboard category aside from the unrestricted one, there's one glitch that's banned, the zip glitch. This glitch absolutely breaks the game and turns it into a very different kind of run, and it's actually banned in every category except unrestricted due to hardware dependencies. In this video, we're going to first go over the full restricted speedrun and then build off that knowledge by covering the unrestricted run afterwards. If you'd prefer to watch the runs in this video without commentary, they're linked in the description, and so are Seeker's personal bests for both categories, which are also commentary free. If glitches in general aren't your cup of tea, then there's also a link in the description to the current glitchless record by Forza. For the restricted run that we're about to go over, I've put together a checklist of things we need to do during the run in order to beat the game. This list is entirely arbitrary and the tasks are cherry-picked by myself. Like, several of these things are entirely optional for beating the game, and there's actually a lot of things in the route that you're required to do that aren't on the list. The purpose of this list, though, isn't to be all-encompassing, just a guide for more casual viewers to have to help keep track of how far into the run and game we are. Oh no, we're approaching the 2-minute mark. That means we're about to get cut off.
Oh hey there, Chicago guy, what's up with the jacket? Hey Minnesota guy, it was gonna be a prop in my movie, Romeo and Juliet 2, but production got canceled when they found out I took this jacket off a dead guy I found laying next to another dead guy who looked super similar. That's right, Shady Drifter and Random Carnival Goer are canonically dead and will never be seen again. Jeez Louise, I'm so sorry about your movie. It's okay, it would have flopped anyways. Kids these days want something new, something fresh. Like Harry Belafonte. Isn't he like 95? Anyways, because the movie's canceled, I'm now contractually obligated to have at least one more conversation with you about the product that we wrote that product placement scene for. Oh, you mean Keeps? Yeah, the subscription service that helps men keep their hair with clinically proven research-backed treatments to stop hair loss and improve hair growth. Oh, what am I supposed to say? I didn't know this was gonna happen today, and I was planning to go to the park, and I wasn't given any lines. Oh, what's that? They provide 24/7 care and support with each treatment plan, connecting you to a network of medical advisors, specialists, and prescribers who will help you pick the right products and treatments for you and your hair goals? Oh, right, and check out these before and after photos. No dude, you're way ahead. Wow, and you can easily subscribe to Keeps and get refill reminders so you never run low on the products you need to take care of your hair? You betcha. And just look at these before and after photos and how great a job. Guy, you're early again. All the Keeps treatment plans are doctor recommended and delivered straight to your door at about half the cost of a traditional pharmacy. And check out these before and after photos. Good job, dude, you got it that time. Yes, nailed it. Hair loss stops with Keeps. To get 50% off your first order, go to keeps.com/tomato or click the link in the description. That's keeps.com/tomato. How'd I do? Honestly, you did great. Huh, that jacket must have been a time machine.
So for the restricted run, Seeker plays on patch 1.02, which is an officially released patch for the game from before any weapons or anything were balanced, meaning that we're playing with damage values and whatnot as they were when the game was originally released. For this run, Seeker chooses to play with the warrior origin, mainly because then he starts with 16 dexterity and 10 strength. The main weapon we're going to use in this run has stat requirements of 16 dex and 11 strength, but when you two-hand a weapon in this game, your strength with that weapon is increased by 50%, meaning that we'll be able to properly wield this mystery weapon with our starting stats. For his keepsake, Seeker chooses the Fanged Imp Ashes since they come in handy for a trick at the end of the run and when used, summons 2 imp spirits to aid you in combat. The rest of the character creation doesn't matter and is purely cosmetic, so once he's all set with his character, Seeker begins the run. The first thing he has to do when he spawns in is grab the Tarnished's Wizened Finger since it's required to open the door and exit the first room. When he goes to open the door, Seeker quits out to the main menu and loads back into the game, which skips the door opening animation, saving a couple seconds of in-game time. This is called a quit out, and they're littered everywhere throughout the run normally to skip animations, but they are slower in real time, so Seeker opted to do just this one to showcase it. For clarification, there's tons of quit outs throughout the run for other reasons, but this is the only one that's used in this run to skip an animation, and usually the run has a lot of instances of that. Up ahead, he's going to jump off the cliff on the edge of the boss arena at a specific pebble on the ground to make sure the boss fight activates, which causes the boss to spawn right before we die from the fall. You're supposed to die to this boss or right after you defeat them, with you being transported to the tutorial area once you do, and it's faster to just answer the call of the void. But you do have to make sure the boss fight activates before you die, else you just spawn back at the building we started in. When he loads into the tutorial area, Seeker will blow right past the hole you're supposed to drop down for the tutorial and head straight to the door that leads to the exit. On the other side of the door is an elevator he'll ride up, and on it he'll drop his starting weapons and shields so they aren't in his inventory, so that menuing is easier later on when he upgrades the mystery weapon. So throughout the run, you'll often see Seeker jumping while he's going upstairs and slopes. Normally as you run, you move at a constant speed, somewhere around 10 units of speed, but when you jump, your speed spikes up to around 12 units before dropping down to around 8 units and going back up to around 10 units again as you land and continue running. When you jump up slopes, you land before your speed has a chance to dip under 10, so you're exclusively moving at speeds equal to or greater than your running speed when you jump as you go up a slope. So when he gets out into the open world, Seeker is going to hang a right here to avoid the aggro of the roaming tree sentinel. This isn't because we're afraid of the tree sentinel, he's a total chump, who'd ever die to him? It's mainly because if he notices us, then we're put into combat, and your stamina drains while you're in combat, which obviously isn't ideal. Right now, we're on our way to our first site of grace. This game's equivalent to a bonfire, which are checkpoints scattered throughout the world that we can rest at to recover health, level up, fast travel to other sites of grace, and more. As he makes his way there, Seeker is still trying to avoid getting too close to any roaming enemies for the stamina reason I just mentioned, and he also jumps here and there while he's going up slope. It's not really worth it to just spam jump going uphill where we are now, because there are lots of small up and down areas where there's a good chance we'd accidentally jump while heading downhill briefly, which actually loses time, like how jumping uphill saves time. So when you first discover a site of grace, there's an animation that plays out of you holding out your hand to it. You have to wait for this animation to finish before you can interact with the site of grace again to sit down at it and actually do site of grace stuff. However, if you block or move at the end of that site of grace discovery animation, you slightly truncate the animation, letting you interact with the site of grace slightly sooner, which is exactly what Seeker does here to sit down and get into dialogue with Melina. The reason we made a beeline to this site of grace is the first time you sit at it, you have this conversation with Melina, and at the end of it, she gives you the spectral steed whistle. After mashing through all the dialogue lines, Seeker is then going to pull up his inventory and use the spectral steed whistle, which summons Torrent, our spirit steed. No, not this guy, this guy. It's only after Seeker uses the whistle and gets moving that he'll then pull up his inventory again and actually equip the whistle for quick use, since it's faster to just use it from the inventory the first time than to equip it and use it. While riding Torrent, Seeker times out using his sprint/speed burst every 6 gallops. This times out the new speed burst with the end of the previous one, and also times out our stamina to drain minimally since it has a chance to recover slightly before each sprint. So as we continue through this area, we enter Stormhill, where Seeker is going to discover another site of grace up here on the right, which is the Stormhill Shack site of grace. Behind the curtain of the game, the map of Elden Ring is divided into a bunch of squares on a grid, with each square having an assigned default spawn location. Some of these grid squares have default spawn locations that are out of bounds, with the grid square of the Stormhill Shack site of grace being one of them. This comes in handy for a glitch we're going to do, but more on that in a moment. After avoiding squirrels here since they body block you in the game as opposed to how they turn into speed bumps in real life, Seeker is going to perform a jump at a certain angle just ahead as he's falling off a cliff's edge, which gives him just enough distance to barely land on the other side. This jump isn't intended, and completing it means that you're pretty much skipping all of Stormvale Castle, Margit and Godric included. To complete the skip of Stormvale Castle, all Seeker will need to do is get down safely from these high up cliffs, which he'll do in a bit by jumping down in a specific spot where he has rocks to land on that'll break his fall and prevent fall damage from killing him. So right now, Seeker's on his way to another site of grace, this one being the Liurnia Highway South site on the other side of Stormvale Castle. So far, we haven't done much in the run other than discover a few sites of grace, but that was all set up for what we're about to do, a wrong warp. When Seeker arrives at and discovers the next site of grace, he'll then use the item called Memory of Grace to warp back to the last site of grace he interacted with, which will end up being the one he's about to discover. As soon as he confirms to use the item and warp though, he's going to pull up his map and choose to fast travel to the Stormhill Shack site. He'll then confirm the travel immediately after hearing the high-pitched chime sound that plays as a part of the Memory of Grace item use. Doing this with the correct timing stacks the fast travel and the warp and causes us to spawn at the default location for the grid square of the site we attempted to fast travel to. As I said earlier, the default location for the grid square of the site we're fast traveling to, Stormhill Shack, is out of bounds, so when we load in, we'll be out of bounds. Seeker does a quit out, and because the last place where he was at a valid inbounds position is in the grid square where he activated the wrong warp, he'll load in at the default location for that grid square. This loads us in farther up the road from the site of Grace we discovered and activated the wrong warp at, saving on a bit of running, and it happens to be near a waygate, which are like teleporters in this game. When you interact with a waygate, you're teleported somewhere else in the map, and this waygate happens to teleport us to the entrance of Raya Lucaria Academy, all the way up here. We need to get into the academy, but the front gate is locked, so Seeker will discover the site of Grace there for fast traveling back to later once he has the key to the gate. After discovering the site of Grace, he's going to do a double jump on Torrent to reach a rock spire so that he doesn't take fall damage and die as he sets off across the lake. We're going to make a beeline towards the building in the distance since it's where our main weapon for the run is located, the Ice Rind Hatchet. Like I said earlier, we need 16 dex and 11 strength to wield this weapon properly, but with two-handing, our strength goes up to 15, so we're in the clear. This weapon is absolutely busted because of its skill/ability, which is called Hoarfrost Stomp. It's such a strong ability that it was nerfed in later patches, which is why runners of this category play on this earlier patch. So entirely different topic real quick, earlier I mentioned that when we wrong warped, we ended up in the grid square we ended up in because that was the grid square where we had our last valid inbounds position. Frequent viewers of the channel who have watched our videos covering other From Software games likely knew right away I was talking about the concept of stable ground. Stable ground, for the most part, is what it sounds like. Ground that isn't moving that you can stand on and walk on. Most places you can walk in this game are stable ground, with things like elevators, air, and boss arenas not being stable ground. While you walk around, the game is constantly updating your position based on what the most recent stable ground position you stood on was. When you quit out of the game and load back in, you respawn back at your most recent stable ground position. So right up here is the dragon from Shrek 4D guarding the key to enter the academy, whom Seeker will run right under before quitting out. You can't fast travel while you're in combat, and quitting out exits you from combat, meaning when he loads in, Seeker can grab the key and fast travel back to the academy gate safely. You can't fast travel for a second or so after loading in though, so Seeker avoided picking up the key until he loaded back in before he fast traveled, since he could fill that second window of doing nothing with something productive rather than grabbing the key earlier and losing time from that. Speedrunning's all about small optimizations like this. So here at the academy, Seeker will discover the site of Grace to travel back to later, and then begin setting up what's called the Pegasus glitch. After interacting with the Grace, Seeker immediately summons Torrent and rides at the railing ahead, then jumps off and over the railing and quits out immediately. When he loads back in, Torrent will be standing next to him and they'll both be just before the railing, and then Seeker will hop over the railing and slowly walk to the corner on the far left. This ledge is considered to be stable ground, so when we quit out and spawn back in at our most recent stable ground position, it's on this ledge. When we load back in, Torrent spawns at our side again, but on the right since there's no space on the left, causing Torrent to fall into the abyss. Almost as sad as when Artax died. Torrent dying like this bugs out the game, so when Seeker re-summons Torrent, Torrent can do this. Sorry Oscar Isaac, but yeah, we fly now. We're flying straight to the 4 belfries area ahead, and the way flying works is that your height remains constant unless you run up a slope which increases your flying height. The only way to decrease your height is by jumping down to ground beneath you and landing within a second of when you jump, otherwise you freeze midair and die from falling into the void. The only ways to break the glitch are by quitting out, fast traveling to another Grace, or changing area with a loading screen. If you don't break the glitch, then you basically run at the same height the whole time. So at the 4 belfries area are 4 different waygates to various areas of the map, and at the top of the 4 belfries is a chest that contains an imbued sword key, which is a one-time use item that activates a waygate here of your choosing. Seeker stands on the chest before opening it, causing him to slide off as it opened, which cancelled the character's opening animation. Now that he has the key, Seeker does a quit out to break the Pegasus glitch since that's still active. Once he loads back in, Seeker will discover the nearby site of Grace and then drop down to the shelf below, using a ledge on a belfry to break his landing. He'll then use the imbued sword key to activate a nearby waygate, which he'll use to teleport to Crumbling Faramazula. Crumbling Faramazula is an endgame area, sort of the beginning to the end, and you're able to visit it early in the game via the belfries. Normally you're on a floating piece of debris far away though, removed from the actual area, and it's more of a you're gonna be here later and it's gonna fuck your shit up moment. When he loads in though, Seeker is going to wrong warp by using the Memory of Grace and fast traveling back to the Stormhill Shack. After first loading in out of bounds in the shack area just like earlier, Seeker will quit out, which will cause him to spawn in the default location of Farum Azula, which is actually the starting spawn location for the area when you arrive here later in the game. This inserts our level 8 character into the end of Elden Ring. I was like level 130 the first time I got here. Right away, Seeker equips the Ice Rind Hatchet, and if you look at the weapons icon in the bottom left, you'll notice that it doesn't have the red X in the top right corner, signifying insufficient stats to wield since he's two-handing it. Something worth calling out is now that he has his weapon equipped, you'll see Seeker blocking while running and jumping a lot throughout the run. This is because if you block and jump, your recovery time after landing gets set to normal instantly, so it's pretty much always beneficial to block if you jump and have your weapon out. You'll also see Seeker just spamming block while running around and not jumping, just out of muscle memory for if he has to jump for some reason. After running past these Azula Beastmen, Seeker is going to perform a quit out. This is to reset the enemy's aggro so that Seeker isn't in combat so his stamina won't drain, but he got a bit unlucky in this run with him staying in combat for some reason. This puts him in a bit of a bind with being low on stamina as he needs to run past the dragon from Shrek the Halls, but quick tip for all you Elden Ring players out there, if you crouch briefly in the middle of sprinting, you don't lose that much speed and your stamina regens super fast, so that's what Seeker does here. You'll see Seeker do this a lot throughout the run as well. Pretty much anytime he's sprinting and his stamina is draining, so anytime he's in combat. Something you might have noticed Seeker did when he entered the dragon area is perform an attack before he landed after jumping down off the ledge. This is because stamina consumption is reduced when you swing your weapon before landing, and you can get an animation cancel too if you hit a wall. If you don't swing your weapon, then you can get what's referred to as a hard fall, which consumes a lot of your stamina depending on the height. If you missed Seeker doing it earlier, then don't worry, because it'll happen more throughout the run as well. So out here, he's about to jump down to an item that he'll pick up, which is the Hero's Rune 2. When used, this item gives us 20,000 runes, which are this game's equivalent to souls, the currency you collect from killing enemies that are dropped on death and can be used to level up and purchase things like items or weapon upgrades. So normally in runs, after running through this room filled with enemies, Seeker does a quit out so that he doesn't have to worry about stamina and also to dodge any potential attacks, but for the sake of reducing loading screens in the video, he decided to just keep moving through the level and figured he can just crouch a couple of times to make up for stamina loss. He just picked up the item called Somberstone Miner's Bell Bearing 4, which he'll give to an NPC later in the run to be able to purchase certain items from them. Here, Seeker is about to perform an attack while falling for the reasons I mentioned a moment ago, and he actually almost gets clipped by some fire from the dragon from Shrek the Musical, which would have killed him if it connected. After grabbing a Somber Smithing Stone 9 here for upgrading his weapon later, Seeker is going to run to the site of Grace ahead and roll past it before quitting out. The quit out is to lose aggro from the dragon from Shrek the Musical so that Seeker can fast travel to perform a wrong warp. When he loads back in, Seeker interacts with the Site of Grace to discover it and then performs a wrong warp by using the Memory of Grace and fast traveling to the 4 Belfries Site of Grace. This causes him to spawn at the default location for the Belfries grid square, which happens to actually be inbounds and in the direction that we'd like to head next. This was our intention with this wrong warp, so no need to quit out to spawn in at a different default location like with the previous warps. Right now, we're still kind of riding around and setting up all the dominoes to fall later in the run, with the domino we're currently focused on being upgrading our weapon. We're currently headed to a nearby NPC named War Counselor Iji, who sells low-tiered smithing stones that can be used to upgrade your weapons, and who also provides weapon upgrading as a service. Seeker used the Hero's Rune to get the 20,000 runes from it, and when he speaks to Iji, he's going to purchase one of each of the smithing stones that are available. He's then going to back out of the shopping menu and upgrade his hatchet 4 times to increase its damage and scaling by a fair amount. This will then be rounded out by Seeker quitting out of the dialogue with Iji and fast traveling to the Academy, where he's gonna perform the Pegasus glitch again. While Seeker finishes with Iji and sets up the Pegasus glitch, I'd just like to say, I hope that you're all doing well. If you aren't, then please remember that how you're feeling does not define you nor the rest of your life. No matter what's going on, whatever's living in your head, or whatever is clouding your thoughts, those things cannot take away from you the fact that there is a tomorrow. Any thoughts of dread or despair, I promise you, are not permanent. Again, they do not define who you are, and they do not define the rest of your life. If things ever get too much at times, then please take a step back and remind yourself that there is a tomorrow and you will be here for it. Just remember, no feeling is final. If things are really difficult, it's okay to talk to others about it and ask for help. We're all human. Back to the run, now that we have the Pegasus glitch set up, Seeker uses it to ride around the outside of the Academy and through a wall to be out of bounds inside of the Academy structure. Past the wall, Seeker is going to ride onto some solid ground on the left, which will put him back in bounds and load everything in. He has to make sure he keeps a wide berth about his turn to the solid ground though, because if you cut it too tightly, you cross a wall too soon that gets you stuck in bounds in a different spot. As soon as he touches solid ground and everything spawns in, Seeker immediately hops off Torrent to jump onto a giant turning wheel and drops down onto one of the paddles to ride it like an elevator. He'll then drop down one more time into a pit with crystals and an abductor virgin. This enemy can grab you and put you into its chest hole, and if they do, you're captured and teleported to a faraway location, and that's actually what we want to happen. If the virgin doesn't go to grab you right away, you can quit out like Seeker does to reset it, and then when you load back in, if you get into melee range with it while being slightly on the right side of it, it'll always go to grab you. Getting grabbed by this virgin kills us and causes us to spawn in Volcano Manor, which is pretty far from where we just were. Almost as if the virgin abducted us or something. How could we have seen this coming? When Seeker spawns, he's going to do some parkour over some magma and then jump off a ledge. When he jumps off the ledge, he's going to try to get as close as possible to solid ground so that it takes just 2 rolls in magma after landing to reach it. Up ahead, he's going to hang a left up a ramp to head onto a roof and grab a Somber Smithing Stone 6 for upgrading his weapon again, and you'll notice he blocks a lot during this part. This is partly what we talked about earlier with blocking and jumping, but blocking also helps you avoid the slowdown pickup animation for items and helps you do 180s without slowing down. After grabbing the item up here, he's super careful with his pathing to avoid splash damage from the projectile that just hit the roof, since it'd kill him if he got too close. At the stairs on top of the slope he's about to run up, he's going to jump over the last step, since you can sometimes get caught on it if you just run into it normally. He then runs into this elevator to ride it up, and was fast enough in this area to make a cycle where the nearby man serpent didn't notice him. When the elevator reaches the top, Seeker is going to jump to get off the ride slightly early, and when he goes to pick up the nearby Somber Smithing Stone 5, he'll again block to cancel the slowdown animation when he grabs it in 180s. He's then going to run up some stairs to a boss arena, which he's going to make sure he enters in a specific spot while approaching from a slight left to right angle. Since boss arenas aren't stable ground, if you quit out while inside, then you spawn outside of the arena, since that's where your most recent stable ground position is. Seeker's approach made his most recent stable ground position a specific spot that he wants to respawn in after quitting out as soon as he spawns the Godskin Noble boss. When Seeker loads back in, the fog gate will be spawned at the entrance of the arena since the boss is now spawned. Seeker is then going to block when he loads in and tap W twice to move forward slightly, and then unblock and tap a key to walk until he's close enough to the fog gate to interact and enter. This makes it so that when he enters, he's partly stuck in the fog gate and the Noble's AI isn't activated. By then waiting a few seconds before moving and doing a 360 to get himself unstuck, Seeker is able to freely run around the arena and attack the Noble without its AI ever activating. The reason why we lobotomized this boss with intent of killing him is for the runes and weapon he gives upon defeat. The quickest way for Seeker to kill the boss is to spam Hoarfrost Stomp, and when he does so, he makes sure he's positioned between the clusters of paper on the ground and the one lone paper a few steps ahead. Hoarfrost Stomp deals damage in a wave, and this boss is so big that he can be hit by multiple wave hitboxes at once. Standing in this spot while performing the stomp ensures that every stomp will do 3 ticks of damage, but you may notice that doing the stomp moves you forward slightly, so Seeker has to move back to where he started every 3 or 4 stomps. After killing the boss, a Site of Grace spawns in the arena, which Seeker interacts with while blocking to truncate the animation and then sits down at the site. When the character speaks with Melina here, it's actually RNG for which position you sit in, this one or one where your legs are crossed. If your legs are crossed, then when the character reaches out to Melina in a second, they have to uncross them first, losing around 3 to 4 seconds. Our character reaching Mormon first base with Melina brings us to the Roundhold Table, which is this game's hub area that is only accessible via fast travel. There, Seeker will run up to an NPC named the Twin Maiden Husks and give them the Somberstone Miner's Bell Bearing 4 that he picked up in Farum Azula, which unlocks higher level Somber Smithing Stones for purchase from them. He then purchases a Somber Smithing Stone 8 from them, as well as a Spirit Calling Bell, which is an item that you need in order to summon ashes, which if you remember from the start of the run, we selected to have Fanged Imp Ashes be a starting item. Normally an NPC gives you this item super early in the game, but it's entirely missable, so it's available for purchase in case you do, and we needed to go to the shop anyways to get the Smithing Stone, so may as well buy the bell there than go out of our way to get it for free. Back at Volcano Manor, Seeker's current goal is to get the Royal Knight's Resolve weapon skill/ability. He's going to equip that skill on the Godskin Stitcher, which is the weapon he got for killing the Godskin Noble that he equips here as he pushes the lever to lift the bridge. Seeker's gonna take a direct path to the Royal Knight's Resolve by jumping twice to get fully on top of the big wheel on the right at the end of the bridge, then counting 3 steps before jumping again to time it properly so he lands fully on the ledge. He then grabs the somber smithing stone 7 and does a roll to both get back to running speed quickly and also avoid any potential attacks the abductor virgin might have thrown out. He's then going to run down through this tunnel that's littered with enemies, and at the end of it is the Royal Knight's Resolve that he's going to pick up, followed by fast traveling back to the round table hold. We're in combat though because of all these little fucks, so Seeker does a quit out after getting far enough past them so that he'll be able to fast travel immediately after grabbing the skill. So when used, Royal Knight's Resolve buffs the damage of your next weapon swing that lands by 80%, but on this patch it buffs the damage of all sources, and the buff doesn't go away if you're attacking with other weapons or using things like Hoarfrost Stomp. It only goes away after around 10 seconds have passed or after you attack with the weapon you casted it with. I'm sure you can see where this is headed. At the round table hold, Seeker levels up his vigor to 17 to make sure he has enough health to survive a future boss's attack, puts 1 into strength to bring it up to 11 so he can one-hand the hatchet if he wanted, and dumps the rest into mind so he has as much FP as possible for using Hoarfrost Stomp. He then also allots his flasks so that he has 1 that recovers health and 3 that recover FP so that he can do even more stomps. The last thing he does while he's at the hold is then run up to Smithing Master Hugh and have him upgrade his hatchet to +9, which is the second highest this weapon goes, and he also applies Royal Knight's Resolve to the Godskin Stitcher. Something awesome for the speedrun is that we don't have the required stats to wield Godskin Stitcher, which means that when we go to use Royal Knight's Resolve with it, we technically aren't wielding it properly, so casting the skill doesn't drain FP, but we still get the buff for some reason. Seeker just fast traveled back to Crumbling Farum Azula, and after running past this enemy, he's going to do a quit out to make sure he has full stamina going into a boss fight. This fight is against the Godskin duo, and Seeker's strat for it begins by touching a specific corner on a structure to hit the trigger to spawn them, then dropping back to the nearby corner of the structure to cast the Royal Knight's Resolve buff, followed by throwing out a stomp to aggro the Godskin noble. Seeker's goal is to do at least 3,300 damage, causing the noble to phase transition, during which Seeker reapplies the buff and continues to throw out stomps as the noble is lowered to the floor, which takes him out pretty quickly. Seeker then uses a flask to recover some FP and reapplies the buff while standing here to block any potential fireballs from the Godskin Apostle, and then begins to throw out stomps where he can at this guy. The Apostle is weaker than the Noble, needing only 3,000 damage dealt to phase transition, and as soon as that damage is dealt, Seeker again reapplies the buff and takes out the Apostle while he wraps up the phase transition. The fight isn't over after killing the Apostle though, because this fight actually ends when you fully deplete the duo's shared health bar, with them being resurrected shortly after dying until that health bar is drained. Seeker only needs to throw out a couple buffed stomps to kill the Noble, completing the fight against the square root of God's foreskin. When Seeker goes downstairs and outside here, he's going to hang a left and do a bit of parkour to reach a ledge and then jump to the solid ground across from him. He takes this path to avoid an enemy that throws projectiles at you, but he still does a quit out when he lands to de-aggro the enemy, so he doesn't throw any projectiles while we're across the gap from him. If you're low enough on HP after the fight, 1 projectile is enough to kill you. When he loads back in, Seeker runs past this dog and makes a leap to a fallen pillar. When he goes to get off the pillar, for some reason he just wasn't able to cut the corner properly and the pillar kinda pushed him off, which had never happened to Seeker before this run. Thankfully his most recent stable ground position is on that pillar, so by doing a quick quit out, he spawns back on the pillar and is able to continue from where he left off without dying. When questioned about this, Seeker remained adamant that this was a tactical quit out to restore stamina. So way up ahead is the next Site of Grace, and when he jumps down to interact with it, he again will block to reduce the interact animation. At the Site of Grace, Seeker will level up Vigor to 30 because there's some strats for the next boss where we intentionally take damage. The rest of his runes then get dumped into Mind, bringing it up to 29 for the FP it gives. This will bring his total level up to 45, way better than being at level 8 like when we first arrived at Crumbling Farum Azula, but still a far shot from the intended level for this area. You may be asking why Seeker isn't leveling Dex to make our weapon stronger, and that's because it doesn't increase the damage of the weapon by a lot. It's mainly the level of the weapon that matters. After leveling, he'll then jump over a railing to get to the bottom of a tower quickly, and when he lands on a ledge to break his fall, he'll attack the wall next to him, which cancels the landing animation he'd normally get, letting him get moving again sooner. When he lands on the ground, he'll go inside the tower and ride the elevator to the very top. On the way up, Seeker takes the armor off his torso so that he takes a little more damage when doing the damage-taking strat in the next fight. At the top of the elevator, which is higher up than the Site of Grace we were just at, Seeker is going to run and roll past an Azula Beastman who throws out several attacks at him before jumping over the railing again to land on another ledge. This ledge is on the opposite side of the tower from the Site of Grace we were at, so we couldn't have just gone straight to this ledge from the get-go since it's blocked off from there. After hugging the wall and jumping around the pillar bases to make sure he didn't fall off the ledge, Seeker hopped over the railing and climbs up this ladder to get back on track with the intended way through the level. All this parkouring and running around from the last site of grace to here saves around 20 seconds compared to running through the level otherwise. So Seeker is about to come across the pathway to the next boss, which is pretty much just a huge upwards ramp. If you remember from earlier in the video, it's faster to spam jump while running up slope, so that's exactly what Seeker does for the entirety of this walkway. Near the top of this ramp is the draconic tree sentinel that's guarding a fog gate to the next boss. Seeker isn't going to fight the sentinel, just run past it, and after he passes it and gets close to the fog gate, he's going to quit out to de-aggro it. This is because one time when doing a run, Seeker got hit by fire breath from the sentinel through the fog gate as he was entering the boss arena. This boss fight is against the beast clergyman, and when Seeker enters the arena, right away he's going to run up to a specific line in the pattern on the floor and throw out stomps to hit the clergyman as he runs at us. After 2 stomps, Seeker will roll to the right to dodge an attack and then run to a specific corner in the pattern on the floor where he's in stomp range but out of range of the enemy's attack, where he'll bring the clergyman's health down low enough to enter the next phase. Seeker does a step back and applies the buff to his attack to start the phase and rolls towards the middle of the boss's body to dodge an attack and stomps 3 times. After then rolling to dodge another attack, we square up with the boss and throw out a stomp to kill him as we tank a bunch of damage from him. Seeker then immediately unequipped all his armor to make sure that he dies from the damage over time that's being dealt to him for getting hit by the last attack, which times it out so that he dies right after the boss officially dies and he receives the rewards. This not only skips the waiting time leading up to a cinematic, but also respawns us, topping off our health, FP, and flasks. We also spawn at the next area of the game where we're typically transported to after the fight, Lanedell Ashen Capital. This part opens with a bit of straightforward running, so while Seeker does that, I know that this is the middle of the video and I usually do this near the end, but thank you to everyone who supports the channel on Patreon. Supporting the channel monetarily is entirely unnecessary, but you all choose to do it anyway. For as little as $1 a month, you get access to videos early, updates on what videos are in development, the ability to participate in polls to pick runs featured in future videos, and more. We recently had a poll where all the possible featured runs were suggested by patrons, so if that sounds like something you might want to participate in the future, then there's a link in the description. Again, it's entirely unnecessary, but thank you to those who do it regardless. It really means so much. So up ahead after riding up an elevator, Seeker will jump down and hit a wall with his sword just before he lands to cancel the hard landing animation, and then he's going to run/climb up some giant tree branches. He's then going to wedge himself into a part where 2 branches branch out from one another and line up his character and camera so the diamond in the compass is aligned with a white line in the distance. He'll then jump, followed by holding W and A on his keyboard to move at an exact 45-degree angle. The timing on this is to press the buttons around 0.3 seconds after jumping. This puts him up a little on the branch, where he'll then be able to run upward a bit and line up his camera so that his head is in line with a black spot visual cue. While holding this angle and running forward, he'll slowly start to climb up the branch, and as soon as his head eclipses a little rectangle in the branch's texture, he jumps, which lets him fully climb up and reach the roof. When Seeker goes to jump off this roof that Midas shat on, he's again going to swing his weapon into a structure so that he gets the weapon bounce back animation to cancel the landing animation. As Seeker runs down this path, he swaps back from keyboard to controller, which from what he says is a pretty awkward switch to make while pressing W and Shift on his keyboard, and after going up these 2 small sets of stairs, he's going to run past a site of grace and head to the right. When he runs outside, he'll go up 2 larger staircases and perform the last skip of the run. He's going to jump onto the railing on the right near the top, then he'll jump to the left and then turn right in midair to get past the pillar goblet torch thing. He's then going to quit out and load back in against the wall, and he has the global illumination quality setting set to low, meaning that the fog gate will load in a bit slower than normal after the quit out due to where he quit out at. This means that when he loads back into the game, Seeker is able to quickly run through the gate before it spawns, meaning he can just run through this boss arena to the final boss arena of the game, completely skipping the fight against Godfrey. In the back of the arena is a tall staircase leading to the final fog gate, and Seeker spams jump as he goes up it, which saves around 0.5 seconds compared to running up them. Also, if you want to avoid end fight visual spoilers, just look away for a bit. I'll tell you when the run's over and we're going into the unrestricted run. So right when he starts the fight, Seeker will cast the buff and run to the edge of where the gold foil textured lines on the ground sprout from, throw out 3 stomps, and dodge Radagon's 3 swings after. After the 3rd swing, Seeker gets another stomp in, followed by dodging a charged up attack and throwing out 2 stomps before Radagon decides to do a stomp of his own, which Seeker dodges by jumping. He then applies the buff again while Radagon's in the air and does 2 stomps when Radagon lands before dodging a double swing attack. After then doing 3 stomps, Seeker is going to focus on dodging the triple slam attack that Radagon throws out here, with him reapplying the buff between the second and third attack. He dodges the third attack by rolling behind Radagon the instant he starts to bring his weapon down, and with just one more stomp, Radagon is dead. Seeker then used a flask to recover FP, summoned the Fang Imp Ashes that he started the run with, used the buff again, and used one more flask to recover FP before the final boss. By running to the side of the boss like Seeker does here and throwing out stomps, the boss will throw out an area of effect attack that will hopefully kill one of the imps. The imp's purpose is to break the boss, and if both die or neither die, then the boss won't break. Now that an imp is dead, Seeker deals enough damage for the boss to transition to phase 2, which it begins by wanting to do a big ring attack, but it only does it if it's targeting the player. By hiding on the boss's side like this though, the boss only sees the imp and stays in combat with it, meaning that it doesn't see the player and won't do the attack, meaning the boss just gets stuck and does nothing until Seeker kills it. After getting the remembrance for killing the boss, Seeker quits out to skip waiting for a cutscene, and when he loads back in, he'll run forward and interact with the figure in front of him to end the run. If you closed your eyes earlier for end fight visual spoilers, you can open them now. So something worth mentioning about the restricted run we just covered before jumping into the unrestricted run is that there's a newer glitch that was found called the chainsaw glitch. If you have a weapon with a skill that you can charge while moving and charge it while facing away from an enemy, then lock onto the enemy to pivot to face them, and during the pivot, you swap to a unique weapon and repress the weapon's skill button, your weapon pretty much turns into a chainsaw with a giant hitbox in front of it, constantly dealing damage to any enemies in the way. This happens because swapping during the pivot like that makes the game give you the first available skill in the game's internal list of skills, which happens to be the one where it's like you have a big pizza cutter. It's very difficult to perform, and Seeker wasn't able to pull off a run with it for the video, but the current any % record by Mufte uses it, so if you'd like to check that out, it's linked in the description. Worth noting is that as of this video's upload, only 6 runners have runs on the any % leaderboard that use the chainsaw glitch, with Seeker's personal best being tied for the fastest run that doesn't use it. Okay, now that we've covered the full any % restricted run, it's time to have a brief 10-second intermission before covering the unrestricted run, so either stand up and stretch your legs real quick or just press L on your keyboard.
And while you relax and stretch, visit our concession where you'll find something to please you. There are ice-cold drinks, delicious sandwiches, ice cream, coffee.
Alright, so for the unrestricted run, it's done on the current patch of the game since it has better performance. The black screen after creating your character is around 10 seconds shorter, which is a nice quality of life update, and since the zip glitch isn't patched. Speaking of the zip glitch, I think it's worth going over how it works before we get into the run. So zips, let's get into it. Here's the large picture overview. Zips are a glitch whereby blocking and then walking for a specific amount of frames, you're given 1 frame of extreme acceleration, sending you flying way across the map. The reason why this works is because of how the animation of you blocking overlaps with the animation of walking forward, and if your timing is correct, the animations overlap in such a way that you're given that ridiculous acceleration. So getting a bit more in depth, when you start blocking, you have to hold it for at least 129 to 135 frames. At that point, you then have to hold down the walk button for however many frames it takes to get to exactly 139 frames total. So if, for instance, you start blocking and then press the walk button 133 frames later, then you have to hold that walk button for exactly 6 frames to get to 139 frames total for the zip to occur. Because the range for how long you have to block before walking is 129 to 135 frames, that means that our range for how long we have to walk is 4 to 10 frames. Based on which of these timing combinations you use, the distance you get from a zip varies. The combo that's considered to be the standard for distance is 132 and 7 frames, while 130 and 9 frames give you the farthest zip. Seeker's preferred timing for this is to block for 135 frames and then walk for 4 frames, which gives him a total distance of around 99%. He prefers doing this timing method because he finds it easier to hold walk for 4 frames instead of something like 7. Worth noting is that macros are banned in runs on the leaderboard, but for the sake of exhibition and not needing to grind out runs like he did for getting the record, Seeker used a macro when doing the run in this video. Also worth noting about macros though is that they aren't 100% consistent. If you know anything about Elden Ring, you'll know that it's not the most stable game on PC and frame drops are common. These throw off the timing of macros and make it so that things aren't inputted with correct timing, so even macros aren't 100% consistent for doing zips. Another thing that affects the distance of your zip is what your equip load is. If you don't have too much equipped and have either a light or medium load, then you get the normal amount of distance from a zip, but for some reason, if you have a heavy load, then you go around 8% farther. There's also this thing called a mega zip. So this is a normal zip, with Seeker reaching the distance of about this waypoint light beam. And this is a mega zip, with Seeker going up to 5 to 6 times the distance. Mega zips are done by performing a zip and then inputting W again at some point in the next 14 frames, meaning you start inputting it somewhere in the range of frames 140 to 153. The later you perform the input in that range, the more distance you get, but if you do the input anywhere in the first 12 frames, then you have to hold the input for only 2 to 3 frames for it to work. If you start pressing W on frames 13 or 14 though, then the input can be held as long as you'd like. You get the mega zip right away. For this run, Seeker also uses a macro for the mega zips with a timing of 12 frames and holding that input for 3 frames. So some of you may be asking how it's possible for zips to be done and you not die from fall damage. The way fall damage works in this game is when you jump or fall off of something, a timer starts ticking, and if that timer passes a certain value before you hit the ground, then you take fall damage. The thing about the fall timer though is that it only starts ticking if you're falling below the height you started at. Many zips cause you to be ramped up into the air, fall, and land all at heights above where you started, so fall damage isn't a factor at all for any of those zips. Speaking of falling, if you zip out into an open area where you'd fall into the void and die, you typically have around a 2-second window before that happens. If, however, you swing your weapon as you're falling, that timer gets extended to around 10 seconds, which comes in handy with the skip later on. It's worth noting though that this 2-second timer only starts after you've fallen past the height that you originally started at. Like, zips tend to cause you to get launched higher than you started, and similar to the fall damage timer, the 2-second auto death timer only starts ticking when you're falling past your starting height. So getting to the run itself, Seeker chooses the Vagabond class since they start with a heavy equipment load, and he jumps straight into the run because no other starting stuff is important. When he gets moving to start the run, Seeker unequips his halberd right away as he grabs the finger and does a quit out on the door, since unequipping it brings him down to a medium load, which will give him the proper distance he needs for the first zip. To set up the zip outside, Seeker stands with his left foot on the third plank from the right and angles his camera to be facing dead west. He then performs the zip itself, with it shooting him to a spot where he falls all the way to the ground to end up in Stormville Castle. If he had been heavy load instead of medium load, or if he had used a timing like holding walk for 5 frames instead of 4, then he'd be flung to just barely the wrong spot and die. This lands him at the very end of Stormville Castle, as if he had just beaten Godric. As Seeker runs to the next zip location, he re-equips the halberd so that he's at heavy load. Seeker considers this to be the hardest zip of the run, with runners not being too sure if this zip is just super precise or super random. He positions himself on the right side of some moss on the ground and angles his compass and character to be just left of a tree that's ahead, and this zip actually took several attempts to perform, with the macro failing 3 times before working. This zip shoots him forward into the rock, which for some reason causes him to bounce back in the opposite direction even farther than he would have gone if he hadn't hit the rock and gone just forward. This lands him where we set up the Pegasus glitch before to get to the 4 belfries, where he just unequipped the halberd again to get back to a medium load to shorten his zip length, because otherwise he'd overshoot the belfries and become rock splatter. Here at the belfry, Seeker again does the chest animation thing by hopping onto the chest as he opens it to get the imbued sword key. When he then goes to make his way to the Farum Azula waygate and hop down onto the ledge of a belfry, he'll do the landing animation cancel thing by hitting his sword against the wall as he lands. So when he loads in at Farum Azula, Seeker is immediately going to perform a slightly different kind of wrong warp by using the Memory of Grace and then Alt F4ing during the loading screen. The game will continue to load though, and as soon as it finishes, the game will close out and go through a few brief loads and menus as it does so. Remember that Memory of Grace brings you back to your last site of grace, and we haven't interacted with any in this run so far, so when we boot the game back up and load into our save, we'll be at the default position for the location we were last in, Farum Azula. You might remember from the last run that Farum Azula's default position is the proper starting spot for the area, and not the visitation cell that the waygate brings us to. When he loads in, Seeker will right away hop on the railing to the right, line up his compass with a little window, and zip straight into the Lincoln balcony on the right. This zip damages him a little since his landing spot is a bit lower in elevation from where he started. He then wedges himself into a corner by a pillar and lines up the compass diamond onto the corner of a stone on the ground before zipping again, which lands him on a rotunda. He's now going to drop down several levels very carefully to not lose any health, and swings his weapon each time since the recovery animation of this falling attack is shorter than the typical landing animation for these drops. At the bottom, he's again going to stand in a specific spot and line up his compass to zip back across the area, which will land him on the roof of the building that's at the end of that giant ramp we ran up last run that houses the Beast Clergyman boss. Here he'll again do some careful drops to avoid fall damage and swing his weapon while doing so. So when he enters the boss arena, Seeker is going to immediately look to the left and line up his compass with a pillar on the far wall and zip to land on a side platform you aren't supposed to have access to. He'll then stand in a corner that blocks any projectiles the beast clergyman might throw, and after lining up his camera with the middle of a crumbled wall, he'll zip to the back of the boss arena where he's able to walk out of bounds. Here he walks up onto a broken pillar and does a step back to position himself for a mega zip. This mega zip launches Seeker way up and to the right, so far away that the boss arena where we just were will despawn, killing the beast clergyman. We have to make sure we live long enough for that to happen though, so Seeker swings his weapon a second after passing his initial fall height, which makes him live just long enough for the boss to die, which warps us back to the arena thanks to a cutscene that we skip. For part 2 of this boss, Seeker runs to a corner in the molding on the floor and zips into a nearby corner, which causes him to bounce to the platform on the side of the arena he zipped to earlier. From there, Seeker will do the same exact thing as before, zip to the back of the arena where he'll then walk onto a pillar and step back, then do a mega zip. He then waits for 5 to 6 seconds until he passes his initial starting height, at which point he'll swing his weapon to extend his fall timer by 10 seconds. He'll then pull up the menu and do a quit out as soon as he gets the remembrance for beating this boss, which skips the waiting time for the cutscene to start and causes him to spawn in the transformed game world of Lanedell Ashen Capital, which again is the final area of the game. Right away here, Seeker runs to a corner where he'll angle his camera so that the diamond in the compass is in the top right corner of a red square on the tree. This zip can be done with really any zip timing, with you being able to get the distance needed even with the zip timings that give you the shortest distance. Now in the Godric arena, Seeker runs up the stairs to the final boss, and at the top, he'll perform what he refers to as the hardest mega zip of the run, which he equips his halberd for so he's heavy load. This zip has no elevation gain, so Seeker swings his weapon after performing the zip so that he doesn't die to the void just 2 seconds after zipping. The goal for this zip is to be anywhere above this line on the map, which is the far enough away point where the arena around Godfrey will despawn, causing him to die. This throws us into the cutscene of him dying, which we skip, which spawns us back in the arena for phase 2 against Horalu. Thing is though, the final boss was spawned in this whole time when we performed the mega zip, and it's currently still falling since its arena despawned too, and it takes a moment before falling far enough to die. Just so happens though that it died right before the screen faded to black here from us being pile-drived by the Ultimate Warrior. Because we just killed the final boss, we spawn in the final place in the game where all we have to do is interact with the figure in front of us to finish the game and the run. If you were paying attention, you may have noticed that not one enemy was killed in the Unrestricted run. That's right, the fastest route through Elden Ring is a pacifist route. So if you've made it to the end of this video, thank you so much on behalf of both myself and Seeker. Additionally, thank you a million times over to Seeker for continuing to return to the channel and help make these videos possible. Seeker was the first runner I ever collaborated with on a video like this, and without him, the channel surely would be nowhere close to where it is today. I cannot recommend enough that you check out Seeker's channel for high-level speedruns of tons of games like Elden Ring, Doom 2016, Dishonored, and many, many more. Plus, you all have Seeker to thank for this video being a double feature. Originally, our plan was just to cover the Unrestricted run, but Seeker brought the idea to the table of covering both in this video, and we made it work. So again, thank you for everything, Seeker. Link to his channel is in the description. Similarly, if you want to see more speedruns of Elden Ring or the Soulsborne series as a whole, then check out speedsouls.com. It's an enormous speedrunning community for the series, with leaderboards and resources galore for those interested in learning the runs themselves, or even those who are just curious and want to see more and learn more about the runs. The community also hosts occasional events that you can watch on their Twitch or YouTube channel, such as showcases of specific categories, races, or even bingo tournaments, so be sure to check out those as well. And lastly, per usual, check out the tomatoanus Discord server. The people there are incredibly welcoming and supportive, and if you have something you'd like to talk about, I'm sure there will be people there willing to chat with you. Plus, they just love seeing new faces. That's all for this video though. Excuse me again. These were any % runs to beat Elden Ring. I've been tomatoanus, and I hope you have an above average day.